After the previous few videos concerning Dragon Age, the Veilguard, I thought it would be best to turn to the one thing that I think will be unequivocally positive about Dragon Age, and will likely also be the best feature of the Veilguard, and that is the overarching story and the lore of Thedas. Many of us are in agreement that what makes Dragon Age great is the story and the lore that binds it all together. Thus, whatever we think of the companions, the gameplay, or the art style, it is the story of Thedas that ultimately unites us in our interest in Dragon Age as an IP. Whatever else the many different iterations of Dragon Age might be, all of them, without exception, contain a wellspring of rich lore about the setting, and with each iteration, it feels as if we're coming closer to a kind of grand unified theory of everything, of how everything in Thedas came to be, and how everything is connected to everything else in this world. Dragon Age is one of the most lore-rich settings ever devised in a fantasy RPG, and each game has raised questions that simply beg for answers, which then in turn open up new questions. Dragon Age: The Veilguard, because of the obvious underlying theme, is therefore poised to be the most revelatory Dragon Age game to date, with that theme being Solus, the Fade, and the Evanuris, the tyrannical elven rulers and would-be gods that Solus waged a war against many millennia ago. Solus's war and its consequences are not self-contained, as the modern denizens of Thedas' understanding of how the world works is entirely predicated on the consequences of Solus's actions and decisions. To normal mages, the likes of a Wynne or a Vivienne, or even the Tevinter Magisters, there is the world and there is the Fade, very separate planes of reality, and to non-mages, the Fade is pure terror, the birthplace of demons and worse. Solus's revelation in Trespasser is thus the greatest revelation ever provided to us in the Dragon Age series, precisely because its consequences are so far-reaching. Not just for the obvious reason that, according to Solus, tearing down the veil will eliminate all peoples, save for the elves, but because the Fade being separate from the everyday world people inhabit is not only the only thing they know, but just how the world has always been for them. As remember, the events that Solus relates to us in his war took place untold millennia ago. Solus is likely over 8,000 years old, and in the gameplay trailer, several key elements of this story are revealed. One rather obvious thing is that by Rook interrupting Solus's ritual, at least 2 of the Evanuris have been released with a corrupted form, and if you look at the video carefully, the pillars that have been erected each represent one of the Evanuris. Things are going down, and there's going to be a reckoning, as Flemeth once said, which of course we already knew. But the details of this reckoning will remain unknown until the game is released, as so much more is connected to the story of the elves and the Fade than meets the eye. When we first played Origins, we could only view it as a self-contained story, and a story revolving almost entirely around the Blight. The Darkspawn were Thedas' biggest problem, and a problem that needed immediate solving. We learned of the tale of the corruption of the Magisters and the blackening of the Golden City as the source of the Blight, according to the Chantry. A story that always sounded more theological than real and plausible, and with the knowledge we possess now, this sounds ever more unlikely, and thus one of the most important pieces of lore that requires unraveling is the origin of the Taint, and consequently, the origin of the Darkspawn and the Grey Wardens. It obviously can't be as simple as the Magisters went against the Maker's wishes, and here we have this mess. There was clearly a mechanical process involved, and there are a plethora of theories that abound online to explain this, with one of the most prominent of which going back to the Evanuris themselves, proposing that the Blight was a weapon of magical origin created by them to prosecute their war, which many millennia later manifested in the corruption of the Magisters and the creation of the Darkspawn. Again, just a theory, but one that might very well be plausible, and is emblematic of the possibilities to resolve the many confusing tales spun throughout the Dragon Age games, especially that particular story told by the Chantry, which is almost certainly a theological account, and not a technical one. And ultimately, we're most interested in the technical explanations for the state of the world and how it came to be. Both Elgar'nan and Gillanane are noted to be blighted, and that corresponds with yet another theory about the Black City, that just as Corypheus stated, it was already black when he entered, and the possible reason for this is that the Black City was the actual prison of the Evanuris, who had been corrupted by the blight weapon they had made. We certainly hope to find out more with the release of Dragon Age: The Veilguard on this topic. And we know with certainty that the mystery that is Solas will be resolved for good or ill in Dragon Age: The Veilguard. We've been told that Rook will essentially have Solas in his head, so we're bound to find out a great deal about his past, as well as his secrets. What actually happened during his war with the Evanuris? History is told by the victors, and I'm certain Solas is hiding something, or even many things. Some people love Solas, some people hate him, and some people just think he's okay. But any way you slice it, his story will have its resolution, and you will be an essential part of it. And what of the old gods? What or who are they really? One of the most popular theories suggests that each old god represents one of the Evanuris, as there are 7 old gods and 7 Evanuris. This theory proposes that it was actually the Evanuris that reached out to those first humans and taught them magic, and in most sinister fashion, reached out to the 7 Magisters Sidereal and lured them into the so-called Golden City with the intention of corrupting them, the Blight, which of course coincides with the other theory of the Blight having its origins with the Evanuris. The truth behind the old gods must also be revealed in Dragon Age: The Veilguard. And lest we forget the Christ-like figure of Andraste, the purported bride of the Maker, and the source of the official religion of much of Thedas. Was she divine? Did she commune with the Maker? And is there any truth to the Chant of Light? Or is it just theological propaganda? The truth behind Andraste and the Chantry is yet another point of lore that begs for answers. Somehow, I feel it all goes back to the elves, although I could easily be wrong on this. And finally, by far the most important mystery to me personally is the mystery of the dwarves. Now, dwarves in general are one of the less popular fantasy races. However, this does nothing to make them less interesting. And perhaps in Dragon Age, more so than in any other fantasy setting, dwarves are the most interesting of the races. Why is this the case? Well, one thing that dwarves in Dragon Age have in common with many other dwarves in other fantasy settings is their general lack of proficiency in arcane magic. And in Dragon Age in particular, this lack of arcane proficiency is deeply tied to the story of the dwarves and of Thedas. This is because dwarves do not dream, and therefore have no connection to the Fade. This is also what makes dwarves uniquely suitable to mine the magic essential mineral lyrium, as they are resistant to its toxic effects. And this, of course, has also given them a leg up in wielding great influence via the lyrium trade, as the other races who practice magic require dwarves' cooperation to access the lyrium. But the real question remains as to why the dwarves uniquely among the races of Thedas do not dream and cannot work magic. In the Inquisition DLC The Descent, we learn that lyrium is likely actually the blood of the Titans, powerful ancient beings with an innate connection to the earth. And this also explains why red lyrium is affected by blight corruption, as the blight typically only affects living things. Titans are enormous creatures made of rock. They are so large that a human standing next to its heart is like a pebble beside the heart of a human. As a result, only parts of them can be seen by us at any one time. The Titans are sometimes also called the Pillars of the Earth, and we are told long ago that the Evanuris waged war against the Titans, and that the Titans were struck down, either slain or made to slumber. And how are the dwarves connected to the Titans? We know that the Titans consider the dwarves to be their children. This could mean that the Titans created the dwarven race, and at the very least that they have a very close relationship to the dwarves, one not shared by any other race in Thedas. In the same DLC, The Descent, we meet a dwarven shaper called Valta, with an intense interest in the dwarven deep past. Valta's story from The Descent may also provide insight into what the dwarven Titan relationship once was. Upon connecting with the Titan towards the end of the DLC, she describes herself as a pure dwarf, with access to seemingly magical abilities. Now, dwarves are not supposed to be able to wield magic, and it's also been revealed that our companion Scout Harding, herself a dwarf, acquires magical abilities. The plot thickens. A page from Valta's journal, discovered after returning to Skyhold after the DLC, details how something caused the Titans to fall, presumably the elves, I would guess, and subsequently, everything changed and the dwarven race broke in two. This suggests, again, that the Titans and Dwarves may have had a kind of symbiotic relationship, with the two parts Valta refers to being the Titans and the Dwarves themselves. And there are several other hints of this in Inquisition. In one codex entry about the Elves as they prepare to go to war against the Titans, an Elven writer talks about the Titans' workers, who are witless and soulless. This may also refer to the Dwarves, when they were subordinate to the Titans. And if you are a Dwarven Inquisitor and talk to Morgan's son Kieran, whilst he still has the soul of an old god, you can make a joke about being taller, and Kieran responds that you cannot be taller, not without the Titans. Then there's a war table operation called the Arcanist and the Fade, which asks the Inquisitor to give Dagna access to items that have been exposed to the tears in the Veil, and the energy of the Fade, so she can study them. After the operation is complete, you can talk to Dagna about her findings. She describes how she was studying a rune, and suddenly, she was tall, really tall, and says, "I thought all the thoughts." Her experience seems to indicate, when combined with other knowledge we have about the Titans, that the Dwarves and Titans were once inextricably linked, and might have even had a hive mind of some kind. And finally, in conversation with Cole about the Templars, he says that they always want to connect to something older and bigger. And then if you are a dwarf, he tells you, you feel this way too, just like the Templars, along with Varric, save for your mark. So rather obviously, you can clearly tell I'm most excited about the Dwarves when it comes to Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Whatever else might be good or bad about Dragon Age: The Veilguard, and we simply cannot know until release, I sincerely hope that these and many other lore questions are answered, as we move ever closer to a unified theory of everything in Thedas. Thanks for watching. If you like my content, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel. It's much appreciated, and I'll check you out next time. Take care.